Personally, I got involved with the Construction Progress Coalition because of my experience at Plexus Software. So I'm the business developer there, and we make software specifically for subcontractors. So that's how that marriage came to be. Now, my background as a police officer and working in crisis resolution, and my 40 years in the combat arts at high levels is what led me to moderate these mental health sessions. So when COVID hit, the world really reacted in a way that degrades mental health. And when you degrade mental health, your positivity, your performance, your physical and your mental health all decline. So it doesn't matter what you do with technology, where you invest into technology. If you fail to prioritize the mind, you fail to get the most out of technology. So we decided literally to make mental health a priority in our mission to unite the construction industry as CPC. That's pretty much, Nathan, anything you want to add to that? I think that sums it up.
I think that's a great way to kick it off.
Awesome.
I want to know who Cal is. Who's this Cal guy that keeps showing up on my LinkedIn feeds? And
you know what? That's actually a great, that is a perfect segue. So for how I was going to introduce Cal, I always recommend that people follow Cal because he is leading, or he is a leader in the suicide prevention and mental health movement in construction. And this movement is being neglected. Like I always say the same thing. We are the type of people who only change the oil when the oil light comes on, and we cannot see that oil light in our heads. So the industry is being neglected. And when you follow Cal, you learn that not only is the oil light on, but the engine is on fire. So you should prioritize the mind and learn how to put out the fire. So Cal, always glad to have you on board. And we really appreciate you keeping the conversation going. And now Nick, we're also joined by Nick. Some would look at Nick and some think that Nick is Cal's son. He's not. Some believe that Cal was his little league coach. He's not. Nick is an account manager and shareholder at Holmes and Murphy, all around general nice guy. And he is a co-author with Cal in the mental health movement in construction. So Nick, always wicked to have you on board. And before I get into Bernie, Nick is actually the reason why we're talking about compassion today, because he posted an article that led to what is happening right now with us today. So when you think of compassion, leadership, empathy, sympathy, these have all become buzzwords in the industry. And I'm going to take you back a few years here. I started working in crisis resolution in the 90s. Didn't mean to age myself, but yes, don't let the dyed hair fool you. I'm old. These were all terms that were a part of tactical communication strategies. And at some point between now and way back then, they became buzzwords. And I swear it was marketers, because marketers ruin everything. And when they became buzzwords, you had a whole bunch of people who didn't necessarily have the experience or the credentials to really be writing about these things, but they wrote about them anyways. And a lot of people are misinterpreting them and misusing them and actually creating more harm.
Chad, I apologize. I screwed something up and all these rooms are about to come in. I have no idea.
These words have somehow become buzzwords, and they are misunderstood and being misused, which in many ways can create more harm. Even though leaders with some of their limited understanding applying these strategies around compassion and empathy are well intended, they could do harm. So Nick posted an article, and when I saw him post it, I clicked into it. Nathan clicked into it. My instant thought was, here we go, another article that only looks at half the picture, but it wasn't. So Nick restored my My faith in humanity, the article was amazing. It did capture what I personally refer to as a dark side, but it did capture the other side of compassion. So these tactics will always have a point of failure, a positive and a negative, where you get to a point where it starts to do more harm than good. And this article did capture it. That's what led to this discussion. That's why we're here today. And what resulted from that is Cal introduced us to this awesome guy, Bernie, and I'm going to let Cal introduce Bernie because I would do a disservice to him if I did it.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our breakout session. Nathan, I agree with Chad. Thank you for continuing this incredible dialogue that we've had now for 9 months about mental health in our industry. And we're really trying to make this relevant. Nick and I have offered to Nathan that we'll help Chad, identify appropriate people. And Bernie is that appropriate person on this topic and many, many others. I first met Bernie in 2010 when I was first appointed to the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention. And I'd been trying to get this to a tipping point from like 2008 with a mutual friend of ours. Bernie was one of those people who quickly recognized that our industry was a high-risk population. And Bernie was one of those people who first said, "How can I help you?" And he's always been a mentor. He's been a great trainer. We do collaborate. We have done business together. But mostly I recommend Bernie because he has that innate compassion, but he also knows how to mobilize this. Where we've used him and where I've learned a lot from Bernie is on critical incident response. When bad things happen in the field or for construction companies, Bernie is one of those go-to people who knows how to mobilize compassion and appropriate degrees of empathy and other support services. So Chad, thank you very much for allowing me and Nick to continue to share resources with you.
Love having you.
Bernie, it's all you, man.
Okay, so first of all, it's always hard to follow Cal because Cal is he sings my praises way too high. I have a great deal of respect for Cal, and you all are lucky to have him as literally an evangelist for mental health. I mean, suicide sounds horrible. It is, but I kind of agree with Cal, and we look at it as the end result of something that is definitely avoidable. And the key is, how do you avoid it? And what I'm going to talk about today is compassion. And, I like to try and keep things kind of fun, humorous, even though this is mental health. I'm going to talk about what compassion is, why it's important for all of you, how to get there, and some of the, I think to use Chad and Chad's words and Nick's words, there's a dark side to compassion. But I want to start by talking about the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion, because I think sometimes we lose sight of that, and that's when we get in real trouble. Mm-hmm. So when we start with sympathy is this sort of base level. It's really you understanding what another person is feeling as a manager, as a friend, even for yourself, understanding without actually feeling it yourself. So you're somewhat removed from it. Empathy is really being able to not only feel the other person's suffering, but also to be able to not only understand, but to feel the person's suffering. That's really important to understand, because as we sort of move up the categories, you'll see compassion is really the most important thing, and you got to be really careful. When we talk about, when Cal talks about critical incident response and trauma, that's really what critical incidents are. It's us responding to group and individual trauma. And how do we sort of settle the situation? How do we get people into a state where they are capable of not only getting through it, not only surviving, but thriving, getting to the other side? And you people know that. And I think this pandemic has really led us. I mean, if there's anything positive about the pandemic, and I'm extremely biased about this, it's that mental health has risen to the fore. Mental health has finally achieved the prominence and the importance that it should have. It is the core of all wellness. It is actually at the core of it. So when we start talking about compassion, which many of us have, some of us don't think we have, but we all have some level of compassion. When we think about compassion, first of all, just so you know, the Latin words of compassion comes from the Latin words to suffer with. So what we've talked about really is understanding suffering, understanding pain of another person, feeling what the other person is doing. And when you get to the level of compassion, you have a desire. You want to help relieve the suffering of others. Now, let's be really clear. It's a desire. There's no requirement to relieve the suffering of other people. And that's when we sort of get into the dark side. Again, I know I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, so just a couple of quick things that I think will help. And then I'll talk about the dark side, and then we can open it up. So I think when you talk about compassion, you're talking about having your feelings, having what's going on inside of you prompt you to take some action to relieve the suffering of others. And sometimes we err on the side of taking too much action, right? We do things when just being available for people is enough to do. And you'd be really surprised how important that is. But the main difference between empathy and compassion is the effect on your own personal well-being. So, think about empathy and sympathy. What they're really more about is that person wanting to be seen as being compassionate. Whereas compassion is about actually being compassionate. I'm not trying to talk about narcissism here. I'm just talking about that it's important to understand that distinction. The goal is to be compassionate, but the goal is also not to allow other people's issues, problems to take over your being. That's where the art comes in, right? It's not a science. And the dangers, as you can see on the dark side, are boundary issues. It's really easy for us to cross a boundary and start doing things that we think are good. The road to hell, it is paved with good intentions. Mm-hmm. So how do we know when to sort of draw that line and not go over and yet still be helpful? Loss of objectivity. If we get too close, we get in trouble. So I'll give you an example from healthcare. Physicians who work with pediatric oncology, it's probably the most difficult situation in the world because 9 out of 10 of those kids that come in are probably not going to go out alive. Mm-hmm. How do they deal with being compassionate? Sometimes what they do is they cut themselves off and their feelings off. There's an appropriate piece to that. Sometimes that makes them ineffective. So being able to maintain that objectivity is important. If you don't, what happens is you get compassion fatigue. And just briefly, and this is where I'll sort of wind down, compassion fatigue is really, it's the exhaustion, the mental exhaustion you feel and the emotional withdrawal you feel when you've been bombarded either by one or many traumas and you haven't sat back to kind of take care of yourself. So self-care becomes so important in all of this. Being able to rely on other people, so important. Cal will tell you this. When we do a critical incident stress debriefing, we really try and have 2 people go out at least. And then afterwards, our people are required to debrief. And they'll tell you, no, I'm okay. I'm fine. Everything's. That's not sufficient. We need to be able to make sure people are letting go of this stuff so that they can survive. So I just want to say, just to sum it up and then maybe open it up to questions, if that's, I guess, what would be helpful, is think about sympathy moving to empathy. Think about leading to compassion, which is not only your ability to feel and understand feelings of others, but also to move into helping them. And then be careful to set limits. And I can certainly in our conversations talk about some of the symptoms of compassion fatigue. I can talk about some of the things you can do to prevent it. But overall, compassion is a good thing as long as you're taking care of yourself and you're not stepping over the line. Did I do okay in 5 minutes? I feel like the guy who used to do the commercials with the little cars and talk to.
That's why we have video, so you get the head nods, right? Or at least from all the extroverts.
That was incredible. Actually, it was really hard for me to keep up with you taking notes. So yeah, that was good. And I think it's time to get some extra clarity on things. If not for everyone else, for myself, so I can take some more notes. So one of the key points that you said there is how to set limits, right? And one thing that I find as a coach is a lot of the times people will be told, this is one of the things that you have to do, but we're not necessarily told how to do it. So to prevent compassion fatigue and holding on to compassion so long that you actually remain in an emotional state and you're not making the most intelligent decision possible because you're not really performing in your cortex. You're still emotional because you're utilizing compassion as a technique. What are some ways then that you actually can set those limits, like real hard, really well-defined triggers that will help you pull back, untether, and kind of contain that compassion? I want to open it up a bit, but I want to talk about one of the biggest movements in how we're working, the biggest changes in how we're working today, because I'm hoping that this might open up some questions or challenges that people are having. And that's moving from a traditional team environment where we are sharing the same space to the remote environment. So I've been on teams since I was 8 years old, and I'm a huge proponent on sharing the same space. At our company, we are all about that. We do not even allow remote work except in exigent circumstances. And the whole purpose of it is so we are getting the most out of each other from human communication. And one of the biggest movements that we're seeing now, of course, the entire world is moving towards a teaming environment where you're moving from the team, the noun, the thing, the togetherness, to the teaming where it's remote people, and team is now becoming an action. You are now teaming with other people and transactions and kind of giving up that human connection, which is amplifying a lot of the mental health problems. So to the people on this call, A, have you migrated to the work from home environment? And B, how has it affected you? And is this something that is of a concern?
Sure, I'll go.
Yes.
So our company has migrated to everyone working from home, and we've even pushed back our lease space agreement to March. So we had a new space that opened up in January, but we keep pushing it back, right? Because the safety of our people matters more than this wanting us to be together. We meet every 2 weeks about where the company's going. Well, we meet, everybody meets every week, but we do a full company meeting about where everybody's at, how we're doing as leaders of the firm, how are other people doing, which has been good because you don't want to pry too much. You want to give people room to know that you're vulnerable, but you want them to be able to come to you. At least that's worked for me. I think. I don't know. That's why I'm here. I don't know what I don't know, right? I'm here because, and one thing real quick, I'm here because like I'm a technical expert, I'd say, in reality capture and modeling and scheduling and all that and contracts, but I don't think a firm can't move forward if the leaders are not aware, or the people that help aren't aware of people's weaknesses. And anything I can learn from this group would be great, just to help other people out that are on my team that may not have that level of compassion. Has it affected me? Yeah, I think it's affected everybody. I think anybody says it would be lying to themselves. Luckily, I've got a great relationship at home and a big lawn and a couple of dogs, so I have room to spread out. I'm kind of a loner. Like I don't have a large circle of friends. I'm a very small group of people, so it hasn't been too bad. But that's just different, right? Everybody's different. My energy doesn't necessarily come from being around people all the time. So I think it's, but that's not the case for a lot of people. So I think that's why I want to understand these different perspectives so I can grow my compassion.
Excellent. I've got a comment on that, but Rachel, did you have a perspective on that before we jump in?
Yeah. So I work for a general contractor, and I support our document control software. And so I train every employee that gets a computer, and I run the back office of this software and whatnot. And so not being able to like physically go out and train employees, see people face to face, work with them one-on-one. Most of our business is here in Texas, but we are spread across the United States, and it's difficult. I'm a social person. I am an extrovert. I like being around people. Luckily, I have a good husband and I have a nice setup here at home, and I'm happy, to be able to work at home. And I'm incredibly blessed. My 4-year-old twins have been in preschool this whole time, and they haven't been home, because I would have lost it, honestly. The parents that have kids at home that they're trying to homeschool, God bless them. But it's been hard. It's been hard being able to be home, balance everything. Personally, I've had a lot of stuff in my personal life in the last year. My mom passed away last summer. I've now taken over as guardian of my father. My family moved in with my dad. So all that other stuff, I'm blessed to work for a company that supports me doing all that and has understanding for me to do all that. But it has taken its toll. I'm ready to be back in the office. And my mom, on a personal note, my mom was actually a therapist. And so whenever she passed, I started seeing a therapist because I got stuff to deal with now. But recognizing, it makes me happy that there's always been this huge stigma about mental health and taking care of yourself. And it's really nice that is changing. It's not changing completely. I don't expect it to completely change. But it's good that there's more communication. Like, I had no issue telling my boss, every Tuesday at 11 o'clock, I'm going to have a therapy session, and he's cool with it. And there's no shame in me sharing that with him. But, I see the toll it's also taking on coworkers that have a lot more stressors at home, are really taxed by having to work from home. Not everybody has good internet, and just all the complications that come from not having, sitting in the building that's got the servers and has the fast internet and all that jazz. So it's been hard trying to overcome some of the things, but I think as a company, we're doing a great job, and our company is doing a good job communicating to everybody. Here's our plan. Here's what we want to do to keep everybody safe. So, we're all making the best of it, I think.
You touched on something. It just reminded me of a story. So when you said you kind of felt mental health is something that so a lot of people don't talk about because they feel shame. So back when I was a police officer, I was okay. So pardon the French. I'm going to tell you what this guy said. Anyways, It was a person I worked very close to the Queen Street Mental Health Center, that's now called CAMAGE. But at the time, I was talking with this guy. He was a paranoid schizophrenic, and I asked him just to share his thoughts with me because he was clearly disturbed. I was responding to a call at the time, and he said, "I'll never forget this," but he said, "Chad, you're asking me to share what's inside my head, and what's inside of me, or asking me what's inside of me, is just like me walking in, watching you take a shit. It's private. It's that private. So sometimes even asking the question can feel like an invasion." So what I do with my team here at Plexus is I ask questions that bring out information that show that there's a problem. So with Monique, for example, I can walk into a room and I can almost feel if Monique is a little bit stressed out or struggling. But when we get into critical stress scenarios here at Plexus, instead of asking, "Hey, something wrong? You want to talk about it?" I actually ask probing questions where, "Hey, do you feel like you have everything under control?" Or the second question that I like to ask is, "For this week, do you feel that anything is at risk? Or do you think we need to throw any resources at anything this week?" The answers to those questions will show that there's some underlying currents that may need to be developed. And I find that helps out a lot because we're not asking that invasive question. And I'll never forget that guy that said that to me. It's like walking in and watching you take a shit. It's that private to me. So those are some tactics, or the tactics that, and I do that regularly. It probably happens once a month between Monique and I, my sales team. And they're really the answers to those questions, when you see a pattern developing, you know that there's something else. And then of course you open up the door to the conversation.
You guys are leaders in your industry and your companies. So it starts at the top. And so again, there's no magic in this, right? So what you communicate and the way you communicate it is huge, right? So if you say things like you just did, James or Rachel, or when you just sit down and you say, hey, I'm just struggling with this, or hey, I get a little confused or I get a little lonely once in a while, you are creating an atmosphere of safety and respect. And I think the most important thing as a leader you can do is to create an atmosphere of respect and safety, and also to share what you feel comfortable sharing. There is a fine line between being intrusive and opening people up to the possibility of sharing. I want to just, there's a couple of things. So the other thing I want to say to you, Rachel, is, and I think, James, you alluded to this too, at the beginning of this pandemic thing, everybody thought, oh, this is going to be great for introverts. Extroverts are going to go nuts. I am not an introvert. I am an extrovert. I went nuts. They were absolutely correct. I went nuts. I like to touch, feel, be outside, be next to somebody, not in a little box. Introverts were going to have a great time. It was going to really help them to kind of, be where there are studies now that are showing ain't true anymore. We're all struggling with this. So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, we are struggling. What are we struggling with? I don't care how introverted or extroverted we are, human contact is a basic need. And so in terms of what you can do as a leader, what you can do in your organization, to the extent you can, try and simulate normalcy. What does normalcy mean? What it was like before the pandemic. We could all argue that wasn't necessarily normal, but we were connected, right? In a real way that we were all used to. Now we're all learning how to connect in different ways, and those things will stay. But it is important. So for instance, I'll tell you what we did with our company. We're not a large company. We have about 53, 54 people. So we meet in boxes like this too all the time. But I have a son who owns a business, an online floral business. And so what we did was he developed these programs where I'll show you, and this is going to not be good. He would never like me doing this, but because I almost killed it. But they sent out these terrarium kits. And then we did a Zoom thing where we all put together terrariums. I mean, they were laughing at me more than anybody else because look what I did here. And to this day, I won't show my son because he would disown me as a father. And my wife has to come in and say, have you watered it yet? But, you have that kind of fun. Those kinds of engaging things keep people connected. The other thing I want to just say is that be cognizant of the fact that the thing that's really different, and again, Rachel, you definitely alluded to this, is working at home has some real advantages, but oh my God, we've created new roles that we never had to do. So right now you got to be a spouse that's connected to your spouse. That's a good thing. But sometimes, it's nice to go to work, come home, then spend the rest of the evening with your spouse, right? Now you're there all the time. You're teaching. If you've got kids, you're a teacher. You're monitoring and managing their time. You're managing your own feelings and you're managing people. You're managing other people in a different way. So I think to be able to recognize that roles have changed and there's a need for everybody to support, and as leaders, and this is the last thing, if it's helpful, as leaders, I always say this, now it's more important than ever, don't manage time, manage output. So really think about that. It's not a clock management system. Most people, when they work at home, by the way, studies consistently show they put in almost 20 to 30% more hours than when they're in the office. So if you got a boss or if you guys are who think that's not true and oh my God, my people aren't going to, not true. You can just rest assured they're working harder and longer. So how do we help them to learn to take those breaks more? So I think those are some things. Make it human, try and to the extent that you can simulate those other things that we used to have. And the other last thing is, this will not be here forever. And so hope is a real important part of compassion too. And I think we can hope and realistically hope that sometime soon, we're going to be back to some semblance of normalcy and connection. I don't know if that addresses what James and Rachel and you were talking about, but it's just practical things.
One thing, my past firm, that I had, about 20 people that direct reports. I get calls all the time, right? Because they're being forced to go back to work as it's the new normal, get used to it, do shift work because we need you to be productive. And they're looking at different jobs because of that, because they feel like they're safe, that somehow they're not being trusted. So I think that, that don't manage time, manage output really does matter. And it matters for those who feel like they can do their job. If you say they can't, you're telling them that you don't trust them. And I think there's something to that a lot of, leaders maybe sometimes miss. And then all of a sudden you have a disgruntled employee who's going to start searching for a new job, over just some basic small things. So I think, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was just a quick thing. I'm old enough to have been able to tell you that I was around in the gasoline crisis in the 80s. And I remember going to gas stations and getting gas, and all of a sudden prices start going up. And I also remember that there were a couple of stations that I used to go to all the time that started having, they started saying there's an end here. And we're just going to give the first come, first serve, and we're going to charge as much as we want. And what ended up happening was I remembered those stations. I don't go back to those gas stations anymore. So how you treat your employees now will go a long way to whether or not they stick with you in the long run when this thing is all over. And that's something to take a long view that's really important. People are the cog of all the machinery that runs businesses.
Yep, you're right. A good segue into, I want to ask Nick. Nick, this all started with the article that you posted. And so I guess it would be great to hear why you posted it, why you felt it was so important.
Yeah, for sure. Before I do, Rachel, did you want to say something? I saw you trying to get that out there.
Oh, well, I really like that. Don't manage time, manage output. I'm taking notes over here. I'm a visual learner, so I always take notes, but there was always this misnomer at our company that, we have, we're a construction company. So you have all these people out in the field that are working, and they're breaking their backs, and we're in Texas, they're sweating, they're, working really hard hours. And because of that, there was always this understanding that home office employees need to be in the office during, 8 to 5, and there was no flexibility in that. And you had to be in the office, and you can't work from home. And some bosses were flexible. Luckily, mine was pretty flexible, but a lot of bosses were not. And this pandemic has actually proved that we're actually more productive. I get up in the morning and I answer emails and I do stuff, before I even wake my kids up. And then I'm able to get them to school and then come home and work more. And then after they go to bed, because my computer's right here in my bedroom. So it makes it real easy to just work throughout the day, which is not necessarily healthy all the time. But it finally squashed that perception that, home office employees, if they're working from home, they're never going to be accessible. They're always going to be, Netflix and hanging out in the living room and not really working. And so I really like that phrase, and I'll have to share that with some of our management at home or at the office.
Thank you for sharing that. So to go back to your question, Chad, I would tell you that I really started taking a look at my own personal mental health and well-being about 6-7 years ago. Coincidentally, I had met Cal about that time, and didn't really immediately grasp on that that's what his drive was, but I was kind of looking at myself and wanted to do all these different things and learn primarily about myself. And then fast forward 7 to 8 years and, reconnect with Cal. And it is an amazing follow on LinkedIn for those of you who don't, because, everything that he does is true to who he is and his mission. And so I started to think about my own personal LinkedIn posts and usage, and it was salesy. It was invites to webinars. It was self-serving fully. Don't get me wrong, love webinars. Anyway, it was very self-serving, and I got zero fulfillment out of it, zero. And so about a year ago, I decided that I'm going to start just putting myself out there and sharing my own journey and things that I have learned about and read about that I think other people would find interest in. And so the first thing that I kind of stepped out on was that, I think of myself or do struggle with what's called imposter syndrome, or at least what I've self-diagnosed as that. And I just shared what I know about it. And it was kind of a flow chart, and really got a lot of great feedback on that, and had a lot of people reach out that just said, hey, I think I have that too. Or, I've always felt that way, but never told anybody, and those kinds of things. And so that really gave me the drive to continue to find topics that, I think are important, and then share my own story as to why those resonate with me. And so, when I, beginning of this year, kind of had a tough situation with my family, and, it really took me back to the days of being nice to everybody, because you don't really know what they're struggling with, right? Everyone's kind of fighting that silent battle, which is something that's always resonated with me. And, there are stories from my childhood that my mom still tells anyone who will ask about how I treated folks when I was, in elementary school and things like that. And so I thought there was really just a big need to refocus on compassion, especially right now, because I think, early on in the pandemic, it was a big talking point. Everyone was being nice. Everybody was touchy-feely. Then I think you get to a point where, the fatigue sets in, and that really goes away, as we've kind of touched on. And then, I don't want folks to lose sight of that. I mean, it's still important to have that compassion, to reach out to those folks. I have these thoughts all the time where I'll see something and it reminds me of somebody, and I'll just kind of think, I wonder how they're doing. And I used to not do anything. Well, now I'll just shoot that random text. Hey man, saw this, was thinking about you. How are things? And usually it's everything's great. Thanks for reaching out. Talk to you later. And it shuts down. But that 1 in 10 that leads to something else that's, hey, this is exactly what I needed today. Thank you. It's worth all the other, useless texts that I send. So that's kind of a long story for you, but that's kind of where I started coming from with those LinkedIn posts, posted things about compassion, self-awareness, emotional intelligence. Going to steal a couple of Cal's posts about psychological safety. So I wanted to be more meaningful in what I'm doing, and just be open and a little more vulnerable, if I may, to start that conversation. And the fulfillment and the reception has been exponentially better than what I was used to do.
That's no, thank you, Dick. That's what I'm taking out of that as being critically important, is the fact that you started the conversation and found that it opened the door for others to participate in the conversation. And sorry, go ahead, Cal.
Yeah, really, really quickly. I know there's many that we still want to engage. Bernie and I are old enough as boomers to remember when we didn't have conversations like this. So Nick, I mean, I'm fighting back tears. Rachel, James, your honesty, just the fact that we're having these conversations, Bernie. Remember when it was you, me, and our friend Bob, and that was about it. And we were like the three amigos, right? That were trying to teach people it's okay. And now look at the acceptance, look at the self-esteem, look at the strength, look at that resilience, all the powerful things from just the way you four have shared already. And I've been sharing a lot through the pandemic that the generational differences and how the younger generation expects to have these conversations. I had that conversation yesterday in a large presentation, and I've already heard from 6 or 7 companies today who gave examples of where they're seeing these differences, and we've missed that. You helped us look for it. So one person went and had a meeting with foremen today. Another group shared and sent me a picture and then a video from a meeting that they'd led today. Your generation, this generation of leaders, is going to be the one, Bernie, that doesn't allow us to lose momentum. And thank you for sharing those really personal comments. That's what gives me hope looking forward.
Awesome. You know, where can you see the acronym behind me here? I was going to say, so the acronym behind me, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It's an acronym that was born from the military. It's used to characterize challenging environments where there's a high risk of bodily harm or death and a significant risk to mental health. And it no longer is owned by police, military, and fire, and first responders. It now literally applies to the entire mainstream world. So just by the nature of the environment that we are in now, the way the world is reacting and the price that everybody is going to have to pay, we are literally living in a VUCA world. So go back to what we said at the beginning. It's important that we're having these conversations. They're the least attended conversations. They are, a mental health movement is still highly neglected, but to Nick's point and Cal's point, and the conversations that started originally with between Cal and Bernie, the more that we have these conversations, the more it opens the door, the more it normalizes the conversations, and that price that we are all going to pay later on down the line will be reduced. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to actually be a part of this, and I'm glad that everybody is hanging in with us and participating. We're all going to be better off because of it. So thank you, Cal, for saying that.
Can I also say that, and I really mean this, I have no reason to blow smoke up you. But honestly, the courage it takes for you all to be having these conversations and sitting in this room, even if you don't share anything, and I'm very impressed with all that you've shared. That courage that's really what it's about. And the more you do it, you're right, Chad, the more people will see it. And the more you demonstrate to people that you have the capacity to do it, the more they'll do it. I really do believe that ultimately, and Cal and I talk about this, and I get teary when I talk about this too. I really do believe that people are born good. They really are. And all people really want is to be recognized, heard, and cared about. And so if people want that, is it okay for us to want that? Nick, you talked about imposter syndrome. I guarantee I will bet the house that you are one of maybe 85% of the population that has some degree of that going on. And we all think we're separate. We're going to be the crazy ones. And, honestly, we're all just people. And, when I go out and do a critical incident, or when I sit in a room with somebody who's in pain, I close that door and I go, whoa, right? My job is to be available and attend. If you can do that for other people, you got to start by doing it for yourself. So when you get on an airplane and the flight attendant comes on and says, and this is the counterintuitive piece, right? And says, if we lose cabin pressure and the mask comes down, put it on your kid's face first. Don't put it on your kid's face, put it on your face. When I first heard that, I thought, that's crazy. I got to put it on my kid's face. But you know what? And you'll forgive me for being crass. A dead parent is no good to a child.
Exactly. 100%.
Starts here. So kudos to all of you for your courage.
You're bang on. And now you made the comment, it starts at the top. So the biggest barrier in any movement is money. And that's actually what prevents leaders from really taking the big steps. I know at our company, we've prioritized people. It's cost us significantly, but it's a price that we're willing to pay, obviously, because, as you said, people are the cogs in every business. And so my question to everybody in the room then is, are your owners willing to make that financial sacrifice to prioritize their people? Are they doing it right now? Oh, yes, James.
So for us, we are a software firm, right? So the thing that we've dedicated to is this isn't solving, I think it's not as pointed as dealing with the potential internal suffering people have. But I think one thing that's helped us gain a sense of normalcy is giving people that permission. Like we do a hack week every quarter. So the developers all work on whatever thing they want to do. They do it for a whole week. Any idea they had, it doesn't even have to deal with what we're working on. Most times it does, just because they want to, it's something they want to try out, but they just can't get to it because we have a timeline of other releases of software we have to get out.
Yep.
Right. And then while we do that, it's actually this week, is Hack Week. And we work on planning for the future, for the quarter, for the following year, for the following 3 years. We do it every quarter. That seems to really help out, and that doesn't, I know we can do better on the, and then that's why I'm here, right? Is to learn, like, how can we do better to have, or for me to help teach people how to have these pointed conversations you guys are talking about. But that's at least one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we try to get everybody together to drink on like a Wednesday night, Friday night. It started off real good and it got maybe down. So maybe the terrarium build could be good. I don't know. And whoever joins in can like join in. We don't want to do it during hours because like who wants to like, come on. Like
combine the terrarium with the drinking as well.
But include, maybe we do both. And honestly, the whole airplane thing, I'd probably just grab a gin and tonic and then give, just because. But no, that's what we're doing. I mean, that's one thing.
Yeah, it's well, the fact that your company's allowing you to do that is huge because it is not the norm right now. Our programmers do a very similar thing on Fridays. They have this game that they play. I don't even know what the game. Tristan, do you know what the game that is that they play? Are you doing that with them? Oh, I can't hear you.
It varies, but it's usually Age of Empires.
Age of Empire. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. So that's awesome to hear, James. It's
and one thing I'd say is it's actually paid back dividends. It's actually made our software better, our releases better, and they've come up with ideas, and it's like, whoa. So it's actually paid for itself.
So I got a stat on that might impress everybody. Hey, if there's anyone on this room that has owners who are all focused on productivity, you might want to give them this stat here. So in my side job, in my volunteer work, I coach. I coach professional fighters at the highest levels in the world. And I teach a course on elite performance during chaos and critical stress. And the whole point of it is to actually perform under extreme stress. And a big portion of it is team cohesion. And so what we do is I teach teams on the elements and attributes of the highest performing teams in the world. And a big portion of it is those non-production related engagements, which is exactly what you're talking about with Hack Week, which is what our programmers do with the games. And when you embrace these top attributes of the highest performing teams in the world, but unfortunately, some of those attributes are proximity related, about sharing the same space, which is not something that you can do right now, unfortunately. But these small adjustments to make up for that proximity challenges do make up for it in the interim. But when you can embrace these top attributes of the highest performing teams, they cost companies a significant investment in the short term. But over a 10-year period, there is over 200 companies that were assessed that embraced these attributes. And over a 10-year period, they showed 756% increase in net profit over 10 years. Then companies that were focused on productivity and that were playing the quarterly profit game. So it's a phenomenal study that was done. 756% increase in net profit over 10 years. Google it, you will probably get the actual study itself. But an excellent book for people to read would be The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. You really want to have a strong impact on your team's mental health. Now, a caution with this is it is heavy on the proxemics.
on, the walking by each other, high collision areas where you're always in constant engagement. Again, that is something that you can't do right now because of the pandemic. But the culture code, in all my 40 years being on teams, the culture code is probably the best collection of attributes that you would want to replicate on your team. And companies that are not investing into these attributes and not investing in their people, holy man, they're missing out. And if they're using profit as a reason or productivity as a reason, they're really missing out. Because you're right, James. You have already noticed that it pays huge dividends. And that is perfectly aligned with what happens in reality on these top performing teams over a 10-year period.
I would also think that there are lots of things to do that are very inexpensive to bring people together.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think sometimes cost becomes just a red herring. And you look, you guys in software, you people in software, you're a lot more creative and smarter than me. I'm serious. I mean, you solve much more difficult problems. There's got to be ways to find hacks that are related to sharing that are fun. And I like to have a good time. I really do. And my people at first, I used to think, oh my God, this is so irreverent. But you know what? People feel more comfortable. They share more. They're willing to share more. One of the things that Cal didn't say is when our buddy Bob, Cal, and I used to get together at these meetings, probably 80% of what we were talking, we were laughing the whole time. And sharing and laughing. It's okay to do that. It really is. So,
Bang on.
Chad, I know the conversation's going to go quickly. There were a few folks who maybe didn't have an opportunity yet to share. If they want to, this is probably a good up.
Yeah, let me see who joined us. Who joined us here? Hey, Nick and Timothy, you guys joined in. I didn't see you. You guys come in late.
Awesome. Tim was getting bored in the technical sessions. He wanted to go deep.
Wanted to give you guys an opportunity to share your thoughts around the topics of compassion. No pressure.
Yeah, let me unmute. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. It's kind of serendipitous, and that I actually ended up in this group. So I was doing the digital twin group. Nathan and I go way back, been working together quite a bit, and my computer ran out of juice. I was out to lunch actually, and so I didn't have a cord with me. So I went home, plugged back in, and then it just dumps me right into this breakout. So I was just listening, and I was at the end. I think I've been on for about 15 minutes, and Nathan was like, "Hey, do you want to go back into the digital twin or another group?" And I'm like, "No, keep me here. This is great." I think it's funny how things happen, right? In our, I guess I'm 46 years old now, and the one thing you do learn is there's a reason that everything happens, right? And especially in this industry and everything like that, you really get to truly appreciate the friendships, the fellowships, the people taking care of people. The one thing is in this industry, I think we in the construction industry, I mean, AEC is huge. I specialize more in the subcontractor world. That's where I live as a consultant, and they're just really good people. There's always, there are bad apples, right? But all in all, I mean, it's just, this industry is wonderful. And I tell you, the reason why I think this industry has been pretty resilient in these times is that we take care of each other. I mean, it's amazing. Like, when I work with these associations, literally, there's competitors part of these associations or these chapters. They are competitors and they're beating each other up every single day for jobs. But after work, they're part of the association. They're team members. It's pretty amazing. So my thought is really about trying to understand, to add some flavor to the discussion is really, especially this day and age, is try to stop and reflect and capture and these moments, right, that are just good moments, today, right? The fact that I ended up by accident in this breakout group, right? But these little things, these things are like huge, right? I mean, we'll turn on the news, we'll do whatever, everybody will be around. I mean, people are on edge, but I think what's getting me through it are these little things that just remind you to say, don't take yourself too seriously. You're healthy, your kids are healthy, if you're going to ruminate on maybe the news, well, ruminate on this for a while, ruminate on, the cool, positive 15 minutes that I've had with you all, and let that set the tone for the day, not whatever you're going to turn on the TV, right? Or not what, the maskers versus the unmaskers and all that, right? Just stop and focus on the good stuff, right? And
hey Tim, if you hit the little gallery button, you'll see there's like 65 people here.
I love this.
That was awesome. I didn't know what was going to happen when everything ended, but yet we have a general session, and that was pretty cool. We're all just kind of like, that was really awesome.
I know. Well, I'm glad I put my shirt on earlier.